We lost David Crosby a couple of days ago. Does anybody want to address that?
I'll just chime in real quick that you can't ignore his thumbprint. Founding member of two very influential band, the Byrds, and then Crosby, Stills and Nash, and then Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. I didn't agree with a lot of his, set aside his maybe personal and other beliefs. I didn't think he set a good example. I think he led a haphazard lifestyle, a la sort of the late 60s, 70s lifestyle. But I mean, his harmonies with the Byrds particularly, and then even more so with Crosby, Stills and Nash, just, they were just really the pinnacle of that era and that music. And of course, he did go on to record quite a few solo records, which I'm not familiar with. The only one I was somewhat familiar with was If I Could Only Remember My Name, and which received fairly good critical success. I think the man had 9 lives. He was, due to years of excessive drug and alcohol use, he did receive a liver transplant. And then in his latter years, he still kept recording. He did do some tours with Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young in the early 2000s. And then in the last couple of years, I think with Online, he was known for his sort of quirky, ask David Crosby a question, whatever, and he would give a Crosby answer. And I know he had a falling out with his close friend and partner Graham Nash. He was, known for creating great harmonies together, but they just said he was just, as a personality, he was just insufferable. But be that as it may, David Crosby, you can't mention the 60s and 70s without David Crosby's presence.
At the risk of, I guess, echoing or using a cliche, we're seeing an era coming to an end. And, last year we lost Charlie Watts. We just recently lost Christine McVie, Jeff Beck, now David Crosby. So all of the people from that era are way up there. And I think we're going to see this accelerate. Back in the day with CSN's debut album and then their follow-up Deja Vu when Neil Young joined them, I wore the grooves out on those 2 albums, really loved them. And so I was kind of shook by his death. I immediately thought of Chris Christopherson's song, The Pilgrim, chapter 33. And this could have been written about Crosby. He's a pilgrim and a preacher and a problem when he's stoned. He's a walking contradiction, partly truth and partly fiction. Crosby comes out of that Southern California, Laurel Canyon, peace and love thing. Yet, guy got arrested a couple of times for guns, went to prison, had the real serious drug issues, and apparently could be a real jerk, in his personal life. But I echo Dan, very talented guy. And, this is a cliche, a voice of his generation, So yeah, I loved Crosby, Stills and Nash. I loved Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. Of those 4, Neil Young was my ultimate favorite performer. If only I could remember my name, I think it was a great album. And then Crosby did a couple of good things with Nash, or way back in the day. Great performer and co-author of one of my favorite songs from that era, Wooden Ships, back when I was a big science fiction fan. Yeah, I loved that song. So,
yes.
Yeah. So anyway, rest in peace, Mr. Crosby.
Yeah, he battled some demons.
Yes, he did. And the fact that he made it to 81 is nothing short of a miracle.
And this was surprising, right? I mean, we didn't know. I mean, he's had health issues and things like that, but we didn't know that he was close to the end, did we?
No. From my understanding, I mean, he was very open about, his mortality. But he was, I think, still doing social media stuff either like a day or two before he passed. And he had talked about he was no longer going to be able to perform, but apparently was making plans to come back. And if you go on YouTube, there's video of him appearing on stage with Jason Isbell not long before he died. So he was still back out there. And ironically, they get together and do Ohio, which was a Neil Young song, not a Crosby song. But anyway, that video is on YouTube. And I think that was just a month or two maybe before he passed.
Yeah. Now I know that he and Neil Young were, they had a rift a long time ago and they never patched up. But I did see where Neil Young came out with a statement where he memorialized his old friend and said good, had good memories of him. Didn't go into the personal issues that they had.
Yeah. Well, I was out.
Which was pretty classy.
Yeah. I was out driving yesterday and I plugged my iPhone into my car stereo and went to Apple Music and I started playing the CSN debut album, just as kind of a nostalgia thing. It's, in my mind, it's still great music. I think it's timeless. Deja Vu is a little dated, but I think that the debut album is timeless. And
I agree. I love that first one. And I'm not a guy who liked all that.
Yeah, I know that's a great statement.
That faux country music, Laurel Canyon stuff, but I always liked that one. That was a good record.
Yeah, amusing little story. The cover of that album has Crosby, Stills, and Nash sitting on an old dilapidated couch on the front porch of a house, and I think Henry Diltz, I believe, was the photographer.
Right, he was.
Yeah, and so they're out driving around and they see that couch in this house. And I don't know if it was an abandoned house or what. So anyway, they get the idea, hey, that's a great picture. So they jump over there, they get on the couch, Dilt snaps the picture. They decide, yeah, this is going to make a great album cover. But somebody, apparently a suit or something, said, yeah, but the band is Crosby, Stills, and Nash, and they're not sitting on the couch in that order. We think you should have them in that order. So they go back the next day to retake the photo when the couch is gone. So they had to go with what they had. So if you haven't heard that story before, there's an interesting piece of rock and roll trivia, and you heard it on Geezerology first. So. But yeah, I thought it was a tremendous album. And like I say, back in the day, I just wore those grooves out.
Hey, Bob, you mind if I bring this up?
I'll take a chance. Go ahead.
Speaking of RIPs, last week Bill and I did another video that we've already published about Viva Voce. Well, we started it off with doing an RIP with Jeff Beck.
Oh yeah.
And then after it was posted, after it was public, I got an email from Bob where he took exception to the way we characterized.
That's a little strong statement.
Well, like, yeah. He didn't like the way we characterized Jeff Beck's impact. And so Bob, go ahead and tell me what your point was there.
First off,
let's see if Bill wants to react to that.
Okay, if you recall in my email, I said politely and respectfully.
I know.
Okay,
I certainly got that. I didn't take any. I didn't get angry with it or anything like that. But I just thought it was an interesting. An interesting point that you made.
Okay. Well, I respectfully felt that you had underplayed a little bit Jeff Beck's popularity and impact in the U.S. And I believe I looked it up, and in his lifetime, he sold 5 point some odd million albums. I can't remember how much, maybe 5.6 million, something like that. 4.5 million of those were sold in the U.S. So the bulk of his sales and everything did come in this country. And his 2 of his albums, Blow by Blow and Wired, which are both all instrumental, made it really high up, on the charts for the years they were released, which I'm not one thing I agree with Bill. I think Bill said in that thing that he's not really big on all instrumental stuff, and neither am I. So I never bought either of those albums, but they sold really freaking well in this country. So apparently, I just think that he had more of a popularity than maybe you kind of gave him credit for.
Yeah,
I know that he wasn't a
surprised.
superstar. I know that. But
Yeah, I was surprised that when I did go back and look after email that one of those instrumental albums actually was certified platinum.
Yeah,
but that surprised me. I didn't remember that. But
I'd like to quickly add on that, on the album Blow by Blow, that was produced by George Martin of Beatles prominence. And I'd read, when Jeff Beck passed, McCartney gave out a statement, and he said they had, visited each other's homes, had each other for dinner. And this was kind of led to, McCartney suggesting that Jeff work with George Martin on an album. And I have that album, and he does a version of Superstitious, and it's just a remarkable statement on technique. And nobody could use the whammy bar like Jeff Beck. And he got a lot of emotion just out of one or two notes. And then, as a shameless plug for a small record shop in Minneapolis, Minnesota, we were there for a little Man in the Street. I got on CD the Wired for $6.99. So anyway.
well, Bill, that's more than you paid for it.
I have an old high school buddy of mine who's a really, really accomplished guitarist. And I was actually up visiting Rob in Columbia not long after Jeff Beck passed, and we were talking about it. And Rob's an Air Force veteran, like Bill and Dan. And Rob said, he said, Jeff Beck got me through a very long time at Thule Air Force Base in Greenland. So, Rob's a guitarist, so obviously he probably felt closer to Beck than the rest of us. But, and I thought Beck's work with the Yardbirds was exceptional, and the Jeff Beck group, the one album Truth, I love that album. So, I think Beck also had one of those mercurial personalities where maybe he didn't always play well with others. So, if he could have planted himself in a band like Led Zeppelin or something, he could be a Jimmy Page today rather than, the solo person that he was. But I just felt he had a little bit stronger standing in the U.S. than
I subsequently, after Bill and I did that video, I was watching the Night Flight Plus, and I came across a interview on Night Flight on one of those shows with Rod Stewart. No. This was an interview with Rod Stewart that I saw on YouTube. I think it was either Conan O'Brien or Howard Stern, but it was like he just made a recent appearance there, and somebody asked him about Jeff Beck, and he pretty much said he said Jeff Beck. His point was that Jeff, he enjoyed the work, he appreciated the work he did with it, but he said Jeff Beck was not a good band leader. He said it was tough to work with.
That's what I've heard.
Yeah.
Played well with others in terms of music, but not played well in personality.
Yeah. No, I just thought it was interesting because Bill and I were talking, and I think neither Bill nor I were fans of Beck in the day, and our takeaway was that some of the people he worked with and some of his contemporaries and some of the people who actually learned at his feet, so to speak, became super huge. Rod Stewart, not Robert Plant, Jimmy Page, Clapton, a couple others, and in that context, we're saying that Beck just never did break through big like those other guys did, and then when I got that email from you, Bob, I just thought, well, okay, we're arguing a little bit of matter of degrees, but also I was taking a little bit out of context too. I mean, I was basically talking about that compared to those other people, And I was surprised when I went back and looked at that he sold as many records that he did, especially that one instrumental album that went platinum. That totally surprised me. I did not ever remember that happening. You know?
Yeah, it surprised me a little bit too, you know, and I know that Beck was always kind of like called a guitarist, but I
Because
figured,
he was one of those guys. I always heard the name, but I never actually heard. You know, I wouldn't know a Jeff Beck song if it came up and I walked up on the street and bit me in the ass, right? And that's kind of where I was coming from. It's like I knew the name, but I never knew the music.
you know, and I don't know any of his instrumental work because, you know, like I say, I just get bored with instrumental stuff really quickly. But, you know, I do know the Yardbirds and I know the Jeff Beck group, you know, when Rod Stewart was with him and all of that, you know, so and that stuff I thought was great. I can't speak to his instrumental stuff because I just never listened to it. But I just kind of felt that I thought, man, there may be a little bit more to his following than he might have been given credit for. But yeah, I was submitting that respectfully and politely. So.
No, I get that. I get that. I just thought it was an interesting angle that you were you know, it's like it sounded like something. It sounded like an email that like a Swiftie would have written to some critic for saying something. You know? It's totally innocuous about Taylor Swift.
Well, I was trying to think, how do I politely say, Scott, you ignorant slut?
Oh my. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll be back with some more good stuff. Just hit that subscribe button so you can keep up with what we're doing. And we will talk to you later. So long.